going back to how you were saying about, oh yeah, I like going to the library, working like from 9 p.m. to 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Right? So like obviously right now you're at the peak of your uni experience in terms of academics. Like you're literally doing the most, I
Yeah.
presume. So I know you said you kind of wanted to discuss the topic of kind of maybe burnout and like, especially within the South Asian community, obviously we're hard workers and it's a good thing.
Yes.
But then we also maybe have a reputation for taking it a bit too far and not giving ourselves like the mental relaxation that we need.
Well, I highlighted the South Asian community in this topic of conversation, but that is not to neglect other communities in the same respect, because I think as a third year student or as a student, I think in any regard, especially during a pandemic, everybody is burnt out. I mean, people that work like yourself, like everyone's burnt out in a way. Do you know what I mean? Like you can't neglect the experience of everyone, especially because of the events of the last year. The burnout is real. Like I feel like everybody I speak to is so done with it, especially at third year uni level, because you know you've had your GCSEs, you've had 2 years of A levels, and then 3 years of uni. It's just like, what's that, 6 years altogether of just intense, like September to September revision, like exams. The pressure was like unreal, I think, for just 6 years. And you get to this point where you're like right at the end, you're in May, like it's the last of the last bit of the term, and it's that final push, but you've got nothing in you to push anymore. And it's just frustrating because you want to, you know, you have to, but there are so many days where you just can't. And I've spoken to a lot of my friends and they say like they plan out, say they've got an essay, they're like, oh, I need to write 500 words this day, and they go to do it, and then before they know it, they spent 8 hours on TikTok, you know.
That's the thing. TikTok.
My I tried the whole like app limit and screen time. I tried it, but there's no enforcement. I can just say ignore screen time or whatever it comes up with. I just press it and I'm just like, well,
at the end of the day, you can't you can't get your phone to literally lock you out of it.
I wish it would though. I wish it would. That's why I always like give my phone to like someone else. I like put it in a different room. But then I'll write like 20 words and then I'm like, oh, phone break.
Well, it's kind of like as well, like, I think because the pandemic has put a halt to everything, there's this sort of expectation that with that comes that everything else is halted, and that means, oh, people having a bit of a break. And I think we've said before, the first lockdown, it did feel a bit like that. Personally, I think it felt a bit like, even though I was still revising for exams at that point, it felt quite like just that everything had just come to stop and it was a welcome break. It's now that we're over a year into it, it is definitely feeling more like a chore. And I think that's the thing, is that things have kind of picked up again afterwards, and they're obviously trying to continue no matter what. And that means you're basically doing the same but under these really hard conditions, which obviously is going to have more of a toll on you, but you don't necessarily realize it.
100%. Like going back to the first pandemic, like you said, the first lockdown. First of all, we have to preface, I just have to say, like, you have to recognize your privilege in saying that you found that a break and it was relaxing. I equally found it really relaxing and it was enjoyable, you know, when everyone was, you don't know, I always say it, the coffee thing, everyone was doing the yoga, the home workouts, redoing the garden. Like, you do have to recognize your privilege in saying that you found it relaxing, because people were going through the hardest time of their lives, people were dying, you know, the NHS was overwhelmed, like it was a really trying time across the nation. However, a lot of people did find that break quite satisfying, and rightly so, because, you know, just a break from life. However, over a year on now, coming in and out of lockdown, easing up the restrictions and trying to get back into life on top of juggling your 9 to 5 or your uni exams or your dissertations or whatever, it's not pleasant. And what I wanted to speak about was, I think, in, like you said, in the South Asian community, because I can only speak from my perspective, but that we have this air of like, oh, we work really hard. And obviously we do, because 60, 70 years ago, when our like grandparents, or even like in a less amount of time than that, our parents came over here from their respective countries, they came here with like, you know, the clothes on their back and like a fiver in their pocket, like literally nothing. And they made what they had. They worked tirelessly hard. I know my grandparents worked tirelessly hard to make what they have for us now. And like, that was like effort that is unheard of. I don't think I could ever put that effort into anything, because but they just had to do it because it was survival for them. So I think we have it ingrained in us to have this air of, I have to just work really hard, and health physical health first, forget mental health, that can just take a sideline. It can go on the bench for a little bit until I get what I need to get prior to all of that.
It's because as well, like, there is no consideration for mental health in the first place. So it's never really going to be.
It's not really existent in our community like that, which is a big thing. I think needs to be tackled. There's a lot of stigma behind caring for your mental health and prioritizing your mental health and looking after mental health issues existing and like potentially incoming for yourself in our community. It's very swept under the rug. It's very taboo. It's a very taboo topic to speak about, and that's why we have these conversations, because we raise awareness, and then that helps people, develop the language that they need to have these conversations equally in their own right. However, I've realised, going to a mainly South Asian high school, the air of like just work and work and work and just don't stop until you've got your A star, your A, your B, whatever your grades, was so ingrained in all of us. No one gave it a second thought.
Yeah.
We were all like in the library till like 5, 6 in the morning at the end of our A levels. We weren't sleeping. We were like a mess. Like everyone was tired. Everyone was all over the place. And no one even thought, hang on a minute, this is really unhealthy for all of us.
Yeah. I mean, I can relate to that as well, because my school wasn't, there was a significant proportion of brown people there, but I think it was mainly because it was a private school, and it was like one of the best private schools, at least in the Northwest, I know that. And it was pretty much an exam factory.
Yeah.
And they did, like, to give them credit where it's due, they did obviously, did these things were like, oh yeah, do this to make yourself feel a bit better, do this. And I remember just at the time just being a bit like, this isn't helping. Like,
I feel like we had those kind of meetings and assemblies as well, where they would do the like, don't burn out and prioritize your mental health, and here's how you develop your like work and social life balance. But it didn't feel like it came from a place of care. It felt like it was a checkbox in saying, we did the mental health thing, now go and revise for like 16 hours a day. Do you know what I mean?
I feel especially like at my school, they had a rep to uphold, so it was very much like sort of like you need to, the figures are like the most important thing. It was never said explicitly, but that's how it felt.
Oh, for sure. Like my school always had a proportion of kids that would go to the Oxbridge universities, and then other than that, the vast majority would end up in Russell groups and in really amazing courses, which obviously is great when you put that on paper. But the state of us in June, when those exams would come round, the definition of burnout was an understatement, honestly. We were knackered, and it was just not healthy. But like I said, no one batted an eyelid to it, because that's what happened every year before us, and that's still what's continuing to happen every year after us. And it's happening with my year now, all in uni. We're doing the exact same thing, because that's how we've learnt to get through exam periods. And the thing is, that is one way of doing it, but you don't come out a better person for it. You just come out a little exam factory in yourself.
Yeah, and just those letters. Like, I remember at the time, you always think at the time, like, oh yeah, GCSEs are going to define the rest of your life. And to be fair, that's not to say don't take them seriously, because they are important to get you to the next stage. But they're also not the be-all and end-all.
No.
Like,
no exam is. Even my uni exam now, it's not the be-all and end-all.
Yeah, like literally, I think especially in this day and age, people are becoming a lot more impressed at what you've done rather than what you have, if that makes sense. Like, what you've done in terms of like your past experience, how you've shown that you want to be part of this role, rather than, oh, I've got this like grade, etc. And like, not to toot my own horn, but like, I'm someone who comes from a quite a like privileged background in terms of my education. Like, I've got like A stars, A's, whatever, like 2-1 at uni, all that stuff, like law degree as well. And during the pandemic, literally could not get a job. Like, and I know obviously that's the pandemic, is like everyone was like going through it, but that just goes to show like how insignificant that is. Like, again, I'm not belittling the fact that you obviously need education is good, and when it's like you're actually enjoying the education, you're actually enriching your knowledge, and at the end of the day it does help, but it's not the be all and end all, and there are other things that can come into play, certainly, and you shouldn't beat yourself up about it. Like, I'm just literally thinking about GCSEs now, and I think the average for our like year group at the time was people had like maybe like 20 to 30 exams throughout the period.
Yeah, oh my God.
And I just think about them now, I'm just like, how? Like, I don't understand how, looking at how did I do that at the age of 16?
Yeah.
Like, that's actually mad.
Do
Like,
you remember having like 3 exams in a day, and there's people
Yeah.
that would overlap and they'd have to go do the whole day in isolation?
yeah. And also, like, obviously, it's good, like, I get like extra time in exams because of like learning difficulties, which is good that that's in place. But at the same time, that's even longer. So you're literally
Yeah.
sitting there. I know some people had literally like 4-hour exams, and it's crazy. Like, I just look back on it, I'm just like, how is this allowed? Like, why is this? And the more I remember at the time, I was kind of a bit like, oh, exams do like show your intelligence. It's just people say that they don't because they like don't do well at them. But looking back on it now, I am realizing how much exams really are just a test of your memory. And having
Sure.
actually had experience working now, I've seen quite a lot of arguments online that have been like, we should be able to like have our notes in exams, or it should be done differently. And I totally agree, because realistically, like, in working life, if I don't know something, just go onto Google. Like, you know what I mean? Like, no one, obviously retaining information is important, but it's not that important. Yeah, it's mad.
The structure of like academic assessment that we use here is so ableist in a sense that they don't prioritize different ways of learning. They don't prioritize people with learning difficulties. Like, you know, you obviously said you get extra time and stuff, but that's not necessarily the most catered way that it could have been for
Yeah.
you, you know? And like you said, the state of exams is a memory test. It is literally how well can you absorb the information in this textbook, and how well can you blurt that back out onto a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's not really a test of how well you understand. It's not really, the extra reading's not necessary and stuff like that. Even in essay based topics, the amount of extra reading I would do for geography, none of it mattered, you know,
Yeah.
because I wasn't on the mark scheme.
I think it goes down to like beyond like the curriculum and into the core of it as well. Like, I remember not my actual what they're called, the professional exams, but the ones that we did in school and that. I remember sometimes we'd do them and they didn't really want to accommodate for the fact of needing extra time, so they were sort of like, yeah, you just do it in the normal time and we'll just times your score by 1.25, which obviously at the time I was like, you know what, I'm gonna
Yeah,
take
sick.
that. But like, obviously that's not
equivalent
yeah.
to like what you needed, and that's not equivalent to everyone else's
Yeah.
state of their exam, like their conditions that they took their exam in as well.
Yeah.
They, you know, that
It's
doesn't make
silly.
sense.
Yeah.
But I suppose what I kind of wanted to say was the state of burnout that I think everyone feels, that I see myself as very rampant in our community. It's upholded by, you know, school staff, teachers, the senior staff within schools, especially by parents and family, where it's encouraged to like work
Yeah.
ridiculous hours and really burn yourself out. And, you know, your parents say like, oh, I haven't seen you in 2 days, or yeah, because I've spent like 16 hours in the library. Like,
I think it is like a cultural thing, definitely, as well, because looking at my like family history, I always say, like, and it's true, that I really do look up to my dad's work ethic in that. So he was the one who emigrated to the UK in 1992. So it's like people are quite surprised when they hear that. They're like, oh, yeah, that's really late. And it's like, yeah, but that's just what happened.
Yeah.
Especially when they hear like his accent, because he does like try and like be as like British as possible. Well, I don't know if that's how he learned it back in India, but yeah, I always really admire his work ethic, and he always tells me, yeah, because he got sponsored to come over here to be a doctor, and when he first came here, he was living on like £1 a day or something.
Yeah.
I was like eating like potatoes, and he was like, oh yeah, like I used to reward myself with like a Mars bar once a week, like sort of thing, like that kind of really hard like working. And like, and I can say that as well because like right now, with regards to my dad, I am like privileged in terms of like my my family, in terms of my dad's like economic wealth. Like he has like worked really hard, and he is in a very good position and is earning good money, but it has literally come from nothing. That's not to like belittle anyone else's personal struggles.
No.
That's just like the way it is. But at the same time, I still see to this day like he does work ridiculously hard, and I know he does it like to support his family, because at the same time, like he, like for what he is, like the house that he lives in isn't like it obviously is not bad, but like he could be living in a much better place, and it's because like he's basically working so hard to give his money to like his loved one sort of thing, which is really admirable. But at the same time, I can't help feeling when he's doing that a bit like, please just make sure you're taking care of
Prioritize
yourself. Like,
yourself.
yeah, like just like I've been like, because I'm turning 25 this year. It's great that he's like still like willing to support me, but at the same time, I'm also like, please, like, just
Do something for
yeah,
yourself.
like, please just make sure that you are taking your own health into
Yeah.
consideration. Yeah.
I think the thing is, on the one hand, it's so incredibly commendable that they worked that hard and they sacrificed everything they had to make our lives better. And they saw that vision before we were even here and before they even had, you know, the houses and the jobs and the money that came along with it. They were putting that work in before they saw results for years.
Yeah.
Like my nana did the exact same thing back in the 1960s, where there was like 12 of them in a house and they would all work ridiculous shifts. Then he like got his family, had my mum and her brother, went to Australia to work in like coal mines just to like send all that money back. Unfortunately, had to come back from Australia because of racism. Like it was just crazy the things that they endured. And he would tell me the stories about like when he'd get on a plane to go to and from, and how racist people would be and like the problems that they encountered day to day, but they
Yeah.
never gave up. And it was that like strength and determination, I think, that we all take on. However, we now have very different problems,
Yeah.
like in a sense minuscule compared to what they had.
Yeah.
We're not coming to a country not knowing the language, can't speak, don't know anyone, don't know where we are. We're not trying to make a living off that.
Yeah.
But our problems are very different in a sense, but we have the same work ethic in that we do the whole burnout thing, and health comes after everything
Yeah.
else, and prioritizing yourself comes after everything else. And I think in the new era of like self-care and mental health prioritization and speaking about how you feel and stuff, when you have that work ethic, you do feel slightly sidelined and you don't have time for that side of stuff. Whereas that's why I kind of wanted to say that we have it in our community so rampantly, but in other communities it might not be so much, because I see my other friends and their work ethics and they are so relaxed and they are just like, it is what it is, it's okay, I don't really mind. It's like they're winging it, or they're very planned in advance, or they set aside 3 hours a day to do this one essay, and if that 3 hours is up, that's it, done for the day, you know. Whereas for me, if I put aside 3 hours and then like 2 hours 59, I'm like, oh, I could just write 3 more paragraphs. I will just spend like the next 4 hours doing it.
Yeah, that's
You
the
know?
thing. Like, it's no matter what it is, you set yourself time aside. But then it's like if you go over that, you go over that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's never really any question of maybe I should just stop.
I just don't know when to stop. I've never known when to like stop, and that's what gets me to a point like this where I've slept 2 hours. All I've eaten is a sandwich and a packet of crisps and like a Coke. Do you know what I mean? Like that's not healthy and it's not sustainable.
Is
But
that where you are today?
that is where I am today.
It's
And
not,
a massive coffee, so I'm like jittery.
that probably isn't setting you up in the best situation for what we're gonna do
I
later.
really thought about that, and I was like, I don't want to see that sandwich again. You know?
Yeah.
Oh well,
Anyway,
we'll see.
yeah, guys, you'll see what we're talking about. We're being quite mysterious, but yeah, you'll see
Yeah.
it in the future.
But you know, it's just not sustainable practices, but it's what we do to get through it, and is what I will continue to do for the next 2.5 weeks without a question. I can talk all this like big talk all I want about, you know, identifying the problem, but I'm 6 years into this exam thing now. I'm not going to change my practice now.
It's hard to unlearn stuff, and
For
it's
sure.
especially when it's beyond the 6 years thing, because it's basically your whole identity. It's like you say, it's ingrained in us. Like we don't really know any sort of different, and it's like totally different as well. Like I would say that I am a bit of a not like lazy person, but I find it quite hard to be motivated sometimes.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that when I'm working, this still comes into play. Like once I'm working, and I want
Yeah.
to get it. Even though I might feel in myself like, oh, I can't be bothered, I just want to stop. I will just keep going.
Yeah.
Like,
But then that comes from the same place. Of
yeah,
that work ethic and the just determination and the never knowing when to switch off aspect of things.
I feel like this is why it's important. Like because it's interesting how we've ended up on this point, because obviously it's Mental Health Awareness Week this week, so it's actually quite topical. I did like this like video thing for Pi like earlier in the week talking about mental health, and one of the things that I said was that it's important for us, like in terms of the next generation, to be the change, because I do feel like our generation is maybe the first generation that is actually kind of thinking, yes, we still have this ingrained in us, but we don't want to necessarily pass this on, or at least we want it. We want to pass. We want to filter through. We want like the elements in terms of the hard work ethic and the sticking to your guts, like that sort of thing. But then we don't want the burnout element.
Don't want burnout, and put yourself first a little bit more, and make time for self-care and stuff like that, and don't beat yourself up for taking the night off, or for, you know, maybe not being as productive as you planned to this one day, not getting every item on your checklist checked off, because I know I'm a sucker for that. Like, I'll have the checklist, if there's anything blank, I will work until it's got a tick on it. Do you know what I mean? It's a give and take, and it's about, you know, being good with your time and sorting it out in advance, and like kind of planning ahead and not beating yourself up. I feel like also a big thing is, if I'm not going to do work that day, sometimes I just know, like, for 2 hours, I know I'm going to sit on TikTok. So fine, sit on TikTok for 2 hours, but put your laptop away so you don't feel guilty about it. But then at that 2 hours, then put your phone away and get your laptop out and do work. Do you know what I mean? Because I feel like if I'm watching Kardashians, or if I'm like on TikTok, but my work is in front of me, I'm not even enjoying the TikTok or the Netflix show or whatever,
like
because
worst of both worlds,
I'm not even enjoying what I'm doing because there's guilt. So just put the time aside and just have your you time, and then have your work time, but just make sure the balance is right.